Welcome to the Rancher's Voice, presented by the Montana Stockgrowers Association. I'm Jay Bodner, MSGA's Executive Vice President.
And I'm Raylee Honeycutt, Director of Natural Resources. Join us for conversations surrounding policy, the legislature, and issues that matter most to ranching families in Montana.
I'd like to welcome everybody to our podcast with the Rancher's Voice, like we said, with the Montana Stockgrowers Association. This is our first podcast, and we feel that this is a good opportunity to engage with members, potential members, to give you up-to-date information on what's happening with the legislature, along with some national issues, and really what's going on in the state also.
Yeah, so we're excited to be here kicking off 2021 with our first podcast. And previously we did have a podcast, but new this year, we're kind of going to have a little different format. So this year there will be a podcast version, but also if you follow us on our social media platforms, we'll have a video option as well for anyone that wants to hop on and watch this via YouTube. So we encourage you to engage either way, but looking forward to hearing from our viewers on what you'd like to hear as we share what's going on here in Helena and around the country.
So in addition, just a little bit of this episode did talk a little bit about a few of the big national issues that are coming up. So we wanted to give a little bit more information on that. We also certainly an overview of the 67th legislative session that's starting January 4th today and what we expect for that. In addition to that, we want to talk a little bit about how MSGA will engage in the legislature and really what our priorities are as we look at this legislative session. We did also include this year in the podcast some invited guests, and our first guest is going to be the Speaker of the House, Wylie Galt. So we look forward to visiting with him also on this first podcast.
Yeah, I think this episode is going to give our listeners a good preview of what we have lined up for the year and for the session. And it'll be great to interview and bring in some different voices and different people. So just a reminder, as we kind of move on into the podcast, we want to make sure that folks are subscribing to the podcast. We will be updating that weekly. And so episodes will drop Tuesday mornings or sometime Tuesday. And then also just remind everyone to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, as we will be prompting reminders there as well and announcing when those episodes are live. And then last but not least, help us get the word out. So if you are listening either on YouTube or on podcasts or YouTube, we encourage you to make sure you like and comment and share and subscribe for all of our episodes to help us get the word out and get in front of folks. So the last thing is that we also want our audience to participate. Thank you for sharing your day with us and bringing us into your homes or your vehicles. And so if you have questions as we continue through the legislative session, feel free to drop us an email at Kenny, KENI, @mtbeef.org, and we will make sure to do and answer those questions as they come in at the end of each session, or not session, end of each episode. We'll be doing a Q&A session. So looking forward to hearing from all of you guys out in the country on what's on your mind and how we can kind of help you answer those questions. So should we start with our national update, Jay?
Let's kick things off.
Perfect.
I'd first like to, I think on behalf of the Montana Stockgrowers Association, we'd really like to thank our congressional delegation, Senator John Tester, Senator Steve Daines, done tremendous work for us at the Senate level. They were a big part of getting the omnibus bill passed and getting that onto the desk of the president. Also like to congratulate our new congressional representative, Matt Rosendale, as he is sworn into office and taking off. So look forward to working with him in that new position as our new congressman.
Yeah, so as we kind of headed into the holiday season, it was a flurry of activity at the national level, and we just thought we would kind of update all of you on where we're at and what happened with those funding bills. So to kick it off, we just have a few highlights for you regarding the omnibus bill as well as the COVID funding bill. So go ahead and kick it off, Jay, and we'll go from there.
So as you know, there was almost 5,500 pages in the omnibus bill. So we're not going to go through that line by line. We're just going to give you a quick rundown of the highlights and a couple of things that I think were of interest to us as producers or impacted us as cattle producers. First was the Great American Outdoors Act. We know that that was passed, and a big provision of that dealt with land acquisition. So a part of this, it does outline in this bill, it does outline the priorities for BLM and the Forest Service on either deferred maintenance or priorities for agencies as they look at acquisition. So that's, I think, a good addition to the Great American Outdoors Act. Also, there is some funding for sage grouse. We know that that issue continues to be an issue. We have a lot of sage grouse habitat in Montana, and we want to make sure that livestock producers are impacted as in the least amount as possible with sage grouse. So we look forward to that. There are also some provisions dealing with electronic logging device. So it did extend that for another year. That does impact us from the trucking and livestock, and certainly has been a lot of interest. We haven't found a permanent fix, but this is a good first start for us. There's also dealing with livestock and removing them out of the EPA for greenhouse gas reporting, which we know would have been virtually impossible for us in the livestock industry to try to comply with that. So that's another good provision in there.
And then last, the most important, I wouldn't say important, but the one of the bigger issues that is related to Montana is that the passage of the Montana Water Rights Protection Act was included in that bill as well. So that sets up a $1.9 billion trust fund that ensures historical water use for all users will be protected on and off reservation. And I know, Jay, you have kind of been around since the beginning of the CSKT compact, but this is a very historical passage and ratification of that compact.
Yeah, it certainly is. It got passed, that bill, at the Montana Legislature in 2015, and there's been a lot of work and a lot of efforts to get that done at the congressional level. And it was certainly a huge undertaking, but once again, our congressional folks did a lot of work back in DC, and we are successful in the final chapter of the water compacts in Montana. And so it was very historic. It is important that it does protect water users on and off the reservations. And so, yeah, we're thankful that we can move that chapter behind us and move on and protect water rights in the process.
Definitely. And Senator Daines and Tester both were very instrumental in getting that passed. So we again want to thank them for that as well.
Yeah, and a few other provisions in the omnibus bill dealing with some COVID relief money. So there is going to be some additional money for some CFAP payments. I think that's important for us as cattle producers. They did break those segments down into fat cattle and feeders, and then also more for the mature cow herd and calves on inventory too. So the percentages are 50% on the fat cattle with the date of April through May, April 15th through May 14th. So that time frame, they kind of got missed on the last payment segment. And so that also includes for the mature cattle and their inventory, it's at 25% of those. So once again, talk to your FSA office and get all those details, but just be aware that there is that second round. And so if you want to participate in that, just please be aware.
And then there was a bucket of grant and reporting funding that was also included under that COVID bill. So the first one is a grant to improve meat and poultry processing facilities and interstate shipments. They also funded a processing study report, which that report will finance a study to figure out new and existing meat and poultry processing capacities for the country. And then there was some PPP tax deduction funding as well. So lots of money and lots of things happening in these last couple weeks of the year.
Yeah, and with the tax deduction, that was a big issue. Montana did sign on to a letter along with a significant amount of other organizations, really making sure that that PPP, if you got that, it wasn't taxable income, so they did remove that off there. So it wasn't a very important provision for us as cattle producers. So it's a good addition on that bill.
All right, so that kind of wraps up our national update, and now we're going to head a little closer to home to the state. And as Jay mentioned, the 67th legislative session or legislature has started as of January 4th, and it's going to look a little different than it has in the past. So we're here to kind of share what we know as of today, and we are fully aware and prepared that it is going to be a revolving and changing situation. So let's talk about what we do know. We know that the legislature is going as business as usual with a few different options for people to advocate or participate in the legislature. So there is a in-person and a remote option, and they've kind of rolled out a couple different options for that. So for in-person, there will be opportunity for folks to show up at the Capitol and participate in committee hearings and things like that. But it may be a little different in regards to what committee hearing or what rooms you've previously met in and not met in. So from where you're sitting, Jay, and having been through the session many times, what are you thinking about the in-person option and how that's going to go?
Well, I think certainly from a Montana Stockgrower position, it's easier to conduct business person to person. We're going to try to do that as much as we possibly can. We know that there'll be masks and potentially social distancing, and so attendance in that committee room will be somewhat limited. But we're fully confident that we're going to be able to reach each one of those individual legislators. We'll be able to make sure that they know what priorities are for Montana stockgrowers, so we can accomplish kind of the goals set by our members. In addition to that, we know that there's also going to be opportunity to conduct business virtually. So you have to be a little bit more prepared when it comes to that. You have to sign up the day before. You have to submit if you want to submit testimony the day before to get that to those legislators. There is also option if you don't get that done, but you still want to provide information to them, you can still do that through email. So there's going to be really a host of ways to do that. You will have to be a little bit more engaged in the process earlier on than we normally would. But once again, we're going to fully adapt as we need. And if committee rooms are full, we'll be able to still be able to provide our testimony and get our positions across on bills.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to note is that it's not just going to be the citizens or organizations like ours being remote. We're definitely prepared for and know that there will be some legislators that will be virtually remoting into conference meetings or sessions. And so that will be different this year as well. But like Jay said, I think Legislative Services has done a really great job at kind of preparing and getting the website up to date so that everybody can take full advantage of participating as much or as little as they want to. So if you are interested in participating and want to do it virtually, the legislature's website, so leg.mt.gov, has been updated. There, right front and center on that homepage is a button that you can click to submit either written testimony or request to participate via virtually in committee hearings. And then they also added a new feature for direct messaging. So there's a second button that you can click that button and direct message with your legislator or any legislator, and that will go to them. In speaking to some of the lawmakers that we already have, they are actually hoping that people will use that direct messaging over sending via email, just because they will be checking that very frequently and looking for information there. So check it out, leg.mt.gov, and that will be the best way to communicate during this legislative session if you are hoping to do that virtually.
Yeah, and I would also offer up, they have done a tremendous job on that website. There's a lot of good information there. So just spend some time to look at that. But if you have any questions, once again, give us a call. If you have trouble with anything, submitting testimony, or you need some help, if you need stockgrowers to submit something on your behalf, we certainly would be willing to do that too. So once again, any questions that come up with us, just give us a ring anytime, or if you need us to help you walk through some of what's available online, we're here.
And that website also is your point of access to any bill drafts, scheduling of bills, all of that for you to check out. And just looking at it this morning, we've already crossed the threshold of 3,100 bills. So there is a lot of information out there, and we'll be going through it over the next couple weeks as bill drafts start to drop and become available for our review.
So just talking a little bit about stock growers and how we engage in the legislature. So we do have a set of priorities that really impact all of ranching in Montana. We're going to, number one, we're going to always protect our private property rights. We're going to protect our senior water rights. We do have a lot of wildlife that impact our business. So anything that deals with maybe harvest rates or anything that wildlife related, those are bills that we're going to have on our radar to protect. Also, just generally regulation. There are a lot of regulations out there that if we have an opportunity to reduce some of those regulations that affect our business, then those are the ones we're going to engage on. And, our overall goal is to reduce regulations so you can do a better job on your own ranch. And so those are just some of the things that we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, and kind of to dive deeper down into those areas, obviously, agency oversight is something that we look at and watch not only during session times, but throughout the year. And so anything related to agency oversight and related to agricultural issues we'll be tracking as well as kind of a deeper dive. We're always and work most closely with Department of Livestock, DNRC, and FWP as kind of those primary agencies that we're engaging with on a regular basis. So from a Department of Livestock standpoint, should we talk about what we're kind of tracking from that agency?
Yeah, I think number one, they are a top agency that we work very closely with because animal health, the regulation, the brands division, it's everything that is involved in ranching. And so, number one, I think on our list is the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. We know that we have good staff there, we got good equipment, but we have an aging facility. And there's a lot of effort that's been put forth by the board and by the department to really put a plan forward to get a new diagnostic lab out on the ground. And so that is going to be a number one priority for us. We know that it'll be somewhat challenging just with the money involved, but there is money that the ranchers will be through their per capita fees to bring to the table. So I think that'll make it a little more attractive. But we know that it's going to be a challenge. There'll be a lot of education on our behalf to legislators telling them what that facility is and what it does. So we're looking forward to having that discussion with a lot of legislators.
Yeah, and I kind of have a breakdown of what that financing looks like. So it is roughly a $30 million price tag that is part of the statewide package under the long range budget plan. So this is outside of the Department of Livestock's budget. It will be part of that long range plan. But that includes total construction and kind of rollout of the process. So it includes roughly $13 million from the general fund that they'll be asking for, then user fee reserves, which is per capita fees that the Department of Livestock currently has of $7.6 million, and then a bonding for that state special revenue amount of another $5.4 million. And so it's a 30-year bond payment, and they'll be rolling that out, and then there'll be some annual expenses on top of that that are related to that user fee. But like Jay said, it is a pretty heavy load to be asking for going into the session, but we will be supporting that, and definitely something that the Department of Livestock and our producers need as they move into the future.
Yeah, and in addition to that, it also does a lot of the chronic wasting disease testing. So that, engages a whole nother avenue of people that, would be impacted by the lab. It also does a lot of the rabies testing. So there is a lot of general public component to that too, that once again, we just have to explain that to legislators and work with them to try to get this accomplished. So
yeah,
we're looking forward to it.
And I should add that those numbers that I shared were the Department of Livestock's portion. I know that the Department of Agriculture will be providing some funding towards this project as well. So,
Yeah. In addition to that, we're also looking at the livestock loss program. That's the program that covers livestock producers when they lose animals and lose livestock to grizzly bears, wolves, or mountain lions. We've seen a steady increase in livestock losses to that, mainly really in the grizzly bear area. And we know that that fund is getting depleted. And so we're going to be looking for money for there. And in addition to that, we know that we lose a lot more animals than we actually find. And so we're engaging with the legislature in a multiplier to try to accomplish covering some more of those costs that producers face out there too.
definitely. And then it wouldn't be a Department of Livestock conversation without the mention of bison. So we have two bison bills that we know probably are coming down the pipeline. The first one is the definition of bison and that classification. It's a bill that we've seen before, or parts of a bill that we've seen before, as well as a county commissioner bill regarding county commission oversight and bison.
Yeah. Yeah, each one of those bills has been presented before numerous times. We feel like we have a good opportunity to get those bills passed this session. So I think there's going to be a lot of good effort to accomplish that. And we feel like we have a pretty good opportunity for success.
Definitely. So moving on to a Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, we just have a couple key areas that we'll be watching as we go into session. The first one is in regards to water. We continue to, support efficiency between the water courts and DNRC, and also continuation and efficiency as it relates to adjudication in the water process. And so we'll be tracking any legislation related to that, as well as costs related to water rights changes and anything really water rights related. We also are members of the Senior Water Rights Coalition that is a larger group of senior water rights users that kind of works collectively together to track and advocate for senior water rights.
Yeah, and in addition to that, on the state lands, we also do follow very closely the state lands are grazing leases. We have 8,100 grazing leases in the state of Montana. They are very important to us. We want to make sure that those are managed correctly, but we want to make sure that the process is in place that allows for us as current lessees to manage them. In addition to that, they also do generate a lot of money for the public schools. And so we want to take credit for the great job we do managing that resource, but then also providing that resource and that revenue to the public schools. So another provision that we watch very closely.
Definitely. And then from a private property rights standpoint, we continue to advocate for those private property rights and protected rights that we have. There is one bill that we'll be kind of working on with a group of folks. It's a trespass liability, a bill. So do you want to hit on that? I know you've been working on it a little closer.
Yeah, so in Montana, we do have a little bit of different rules on the legislative books that don't provide as much protection for if somebody trespasses on your land and gets hurt. That liability there is not as strong as a number of other neighboring states. And so we're looking at strengthening that legislation to provide more protections for private landowners. And so we have a lot of interest from a lot of other different groups that I think will engage in that also. And so once again, we'll see how that, when we get it drafted, how it looks and all the stakeholders that we can get involved in that.
Yeah, and then lastly, kind of bucketing together, fish, wildlife management. There's no real key issues that we are aware of for legislation. I mean, there will be issues, but nothing really on our radar right now, but we'll be continuing to track kind of that bucket of policy as well as bill drafts start rolling out.
Yeah, and I think just lastly, we always look at the tax revenue for the state and the tax structure of that. And if there is a chance that we could potentially reduce any tax burden on Montana producers, then we're going to be looking at that. There is some, I think, interest in looking at the business equipment tax. There's also, efforts to look at workers' compensation, those rates, if we can reduce those in some manner or fashion, that's going to help us as producers too. So, and the governor has already shown that they have a lot of interest in looking at that tax structure. So we'll engage in all of those tax debates as we get rolling in the session.
Yeah, and we would encourage all of our listeners, if there's an issue that you're aware of or want us to take a closer look at or be a resource for you, feel free to reach out. We are available. Our information is on Stock Growers. Our email is great, phone number. Just don't hesitate to reach out, and we can be a resource for any questions that you have leading into the start of the session. So with that, I think it's time to introduce our first interview. And so we had the opportunity to sit down last week with the newly elected Speaker of the House, Wylie Galt. And Wylie is just going to share with you a bit about what session looks like from his perspective, as well as some upcoming legislation and issues that he's tracking from a Speaker of the House standpoint. So here's Wylie Galt.
Well, for today's episode, I'd like to introduce the new Speaker of the House, Mr. Wylie Galt. He's a representative from the White Sulphur area, and we're pretty excited to have him join us today. And just for our listeners outside your district, maybe you could share just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I am a fifth generation rancher outside Martinsdale, which splits between Harlow and White Sulphur. My district is 6 counties, so it goes from just up Deep Creek to almost outside Billings, then outside Belt to outside Lewistown. So I basically just introduced it as I have central Montana. Outside of ranching, I got bored and right before COVID bought a bar, which was interesting. So I have felt the COVID restrictions come in hard through all of this, and I'm really excited to get into the session so we can start getting some of these businesses, because I know the bar business that I have felt has definitely taken a good kick to the teeth the last year. And so yeah, just excited to get started.
So is that, is your district, it's one of the bigger districts out there, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't quite compete with that Eastern Montana district that they've got around Miles City, but I'm not far behind them.
Yeah, that one is certainly covers a big portion of the state. That's a lot of ground to travel for one person.
Yeah.
So you mentioned COVID, and interesting to hear your perspective as an entrepreneur into the new bar business during COVID. But this year is like none other in 2020, and I think everybody has felt the impacts of it, and we will definitely feel the impacts as we go into session. So as speaker, what can you tell us about how session's going to operate and what that environment is going to be like as we kind of move into the session?
Yeah, I have prefaced this with how we start on day 1 through 7 may look different than on day 20. But we have a COVID panel that's put together of House and Senate leadership that's going to allow us to move quickly with changes that come from vaccine and all of that. But we're starting out in a hybrid method where we're allowing everyone to participate within a way they feel comfortable with, if it's being in the building or if it's being remote the whole time. And the same is going to go for the public as well. We'll have Zoom, written testimony. I think we figured out that they'll have 2 more options to participate this session than they've had in past sessions. So making sure we had public participation was our number 1 goal going into this, with also doing it safely so that the people of Montana could have their fingerprints on this session.
Excellent. And from a citizen perspective, starting out, do you have any tips or suggestions for them on what's the best way for them to get involved?
The mt.leg website we have is going to have a lot of the information on it. It'll have the bills. It'll also be able to try out our new written testimony option in there that will be able to go right to the website and put your testimony on there. And that way it can get read right into the committee record. So it's going to be the website is going to be a lot more useful for on the remote side to getting the participation in that way.
So Speaker Galt, so I would certainly understand that also, that as we kind of engage at the beginning of the legislature, we, we start things out. We probably want to expect to be somewhat fluid in this as things change. And then, like you said, we probably would expect maybe some of those updates on the website to kind of keep people informed of how things are changing, or, what's the best option to maybe engage.
It's going to be very fluid and very interesting. I mean, we all have the idea of how session has ran in the past and the amount of people coming through. So we've kind of gone to that, and it's going to be interesting what kind of people are still going to be in the building, that, for when it comes to the social distancing. And, there's going to be certain areas of the Capitol that are going to be mask zones and that are going to look a little different that has in the past.
Sure. Well, just kind of moving on, I'd like to talk a little bit about the budget. Initially we looked at that the budget might be in somewhat of a difficult shape, and then it seemed like that changed a bit. And so we were just kind of curious, kind of your thoughts on the budget, or maybe even the budget forecast as we enter into this session, what that may look like, or how some of those discussions may go.
Well, I would say that the budget kind of followed what cattle prices did. Around June, July, everyone was wringing their hands, really worried about what was going to happen. And then come October, November, we started seeing a little more light at the end of the tunnel than we thought. I mean, it's still down. There's going to have to be a lot of tightening of the belt going on, throughout state government. We're definitely, the appropriations and finance and claims guys are right in the middle of, giving the governor ideas about where some efficiencies and savings can be. But, what that final picture looks like, it's a little hard to say at this moment.
Sure. And certainly from the governor-elect's perspective and his new budget director, Kurt Almy, it looks like he'll be certainly a good person for that position. He's a very intelligent person, and I look forward to kind of working with him.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. And, he brings a lot of history to the position as well, because I think he was around the last time that we had Republican House, Senate, and governor. So he's been able to kind of tell us what to expect and what it looks like, because there's not a lot of legislators at the moment that have ever been through a session like this.
Sure.
Great. Well, being aware of the budget will definitely have some impacts on priorities, but as Speaker of the House, we would love to hear a little bit more from you about your priorities for this upcoming session and what those might look like.
Yeah, I would say the number one that we're going to be coming in with is to improve the business environment in Montana. That's going to be kind of a two-prong approach that we're going with. What we're hoping, depending on what the final picture looks like, that we're hoping to get some kind of tax relief for businesses to allow them kind of to springboard off the year that has kind of put a pinch on everyone. But I think that the bigger one, and the more that the daily people of Montana will see, is a big regulation reduction. I know that Lieutenant Governor Juris has spent a lot of time really digging through all of that, and all of us are really excited to see what she's found when she gets done doing it. And I have a feeling that that's going to help a lot of businesses be a little more fluid in what they can do to start back up and rebound from this.
Great. Well, I know that, certainly as Speaker of the House, you have a pretty full plate, and there's a lot of moving parts when we do hit legislature, and even this year there'll be probably even more on top of that. But given that you still are Speaker, do you have any legislation that you're looking at maybe carrying this session, or working on, or being a part of?
Yeah, there's a handful of bills. I don't know how many I will end up carrying. So I've been pretty good at passing those off to anyone who shows any interest at the moment. I've been working a lot over the last month on a state compact meat processing bill. It sounds like I'm going to be able to hand that one off to Brandon Lear, the newly elected representative from Eastern Montana, whose district's really going to see the benefits of, kind of be able to have a little more fluid ability to go across state lines with these state inspected. And that kind of comes from, with buying the bar, we try to do a more vertically integrated system to where, we're raising the cow to serving the cow. And what we ran into with COVID is we ran into a processing problem. I mean, with not only some of the processing plants that shut down, but there's definitely been a market shift that a lot of people want to know where their food's coming from a lot more, and being able to see where it was raised. So it has put a big strain on Montana meat processors, and I know a lot of the ones we're talking to, it's they're 6 months to a year out before you can get a cow killed, and I'm running through a steer a month right now in the bar. So that's a little hard for me to keep my system going under that. So we need something to allow more processors to come up to, meet this new demand that the people of Montana are having.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that is a very consistent message of what we've heard out there in the country also, just that, the lack of capacity for meat processing. And I think I would agree with you 100% that, there is a lot of folks out there that want to know where their food comes from. And I don't see that really decreasing. I see that probably on the increase. And so, yeah, we're look forward to kind of working with you is on that bill and seeing what we can do, because, even on the federal level where they were looking at trying to do some federal legislation on increasing, allowing some state inspected meat to get across state lines. I think, yeah, there's a lot of room there for some improvements and trying to get some of that done.
Yeah, and my legislation will definitely have a check to make sure that each state has somewhat similar, bars on their inspections. Our number one goal is to make sure that we're having good, safe meat that is being sold. And what I'm hoping is this kind of gets us, away from the big four processors and allows us to be able to start marketing our own meat, which, we all have the pride that, Montana beef's about the best you're going to find.
I agree 100% on that one too.
Definitely. So kind of under that same umbrella of like agriculture issues, you coming from an ag background and a rural background, and most of your constituents kind of fall into that same bucket. There are a couple other key or significant issues that we're tracking from a stock grower side. And so we just wanted to get your thoughts on some of the bills that are coming down the pipeline. The first one specifically would be in regards to the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab, and the Department of Livestock will be coming in asking for support and funding for that, and wanted to get your thoughts on that process, that bill, and anything you can tell us there.
Yeah, the having those diagnostic labs are very important, especially with the brucellosis that we have in the state that I think we've done an excellent job on handling and keeping a pretty good lid on. So having the funding to have the background for that is very important. And with a kind of a slower budget session, it's allowed people to kind of do a little more outside the box thinking on how to fund some of these things. I think a lot of good ideas will come from it.
Great. Well, we hope to continue having that conversation, not only with you, but others, because we know that that's very important for many folks around the state, and to also, like you said, keep in check the brucellosis for our state. So great. And then the second one that we're kind of watching is in regards to the Livestock Loss Board and the proposed multiplier. And so do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's the livestock loss has been interesting because it's a problem that gets dropped in our lap that, a lot of ranchers are of the same mind thought that when they bring these predators into the state and, say that there's going to be this great tourist boost from it, it seems to be kind of leveled on the backs of our herds that it happens from. So, and I mean, even from that to, the grazing of the elk and all of the little programs we have like that to, help the rancher get through what the livestock, not the livestock, what the wildlife is doing that we have to live with day to day, that, you know, some people just have to look at for a day and take a picture of, and then we live with the rest of the year.
Great. And once again, we know that there are a lot of bill draft requests out there, and we'll know that there's a lot of other issues that come up with ag, and we'll certainly look forward to working with you as those get more fully developed. I think just for our listeners, just trying to maybe kind of wrap things up a little bit. We just kind of want to know maybe your kind of tips. We know that this session, once again, is going to be a little bit different, but what do you think the best way maybe for our listeners to be the most effective during this session to interact either with legislators or with legislation? Do you have any tips on that might be the best way for them to interact?
You know, what we put, and I put my personal cell phone number, I know a lot of others do, but right on the state website there. And I know a lot of the members are more than happy to take a phone call from a constituent. Also through the website, we have a message portal that we have, those messages actually land on our desk in a little piece of paper. And I know everyone sits down and looks through those and reads through them. And they're a very effective way to get you whatever ideas or problems you have to the legislators' hands to look at. And then, of course, email is also a great way to reach us. I know we all try to spend some time throughout the day going through our emails. There is times, as we've seen, that, you know, a hot button wolf bill will get some out-of-staters to clog our emails up, but we've gotten pretty good at being able to get through those and down to the actual people of Montana when it comes to issues like that.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us today. And once again, we look forward to working with you as the Speaker of the House. And once again, congratulate you on that position. I know that you'll do a great job. And so, yeah, we look forward to working with you.
Yeah, no, I'm just that happy to have a strong agricultural voice sitting in there.
Well, I'd like to thank Speaker of the House, Wylie Galt, for joining us. He did a nice job, and we appreciate his time of joining us, provided a good update of what to expect in the next legislative session. And so we look forward to, in addition to Speaker Galt, some other interviewees that impact the committees that do impact ranching. So stay tuned for that.
And now it's the fun part. All right, it's the question to answer. We wanted to thank everyone who submitted questions this last week to us, and encourage you, listeners, to send questions in as you kind of listen along moving into the future. As a reminder, you can send those questions to Kenny, Keni, at mtbeef.org. Or if you're on social media, feel free to shoot us a direct message, and we will get those questions lined up for upcoming episodes. So I get to be the interviewer a little bit on these, and I'm going to ask Jay the 3 questions that we have for this Q&A section. So the first one is, what is MSGA doing for Montana cattlemen and cattlewomen during the legislative session?
Well, thanks. I think it is important to understand all the processes that MSGA goes through during a legislative session. So I think to start with, we have over 3,100 bill draft requests. So MSGA, we look through each and every one of those bill draft requests. We identify the ones that we think who could impact ag. We put that in a preference list. We build that preference list up to somewhere between 250 to 300 bills, sometimes a little more than that. And we make sure that each and every one of those, we take a look. If they are going to impact ag, then we're going to take a position. We're going to look at our policy book and see where, how that may impact us and what position we take. So in addition to doing that, we want to make sure that we tell all our members what we're doing. So we're doing things through our podcast like we are today. We do it through our legislative email update. We do that through our newsletter. And also we're available for any questions. So if you have a question on a bill that comes up and you would like to know what Montana Stockgrowers' position on that is, please give us a ring. In addition to that, we're also reaching out to each one of our individual legislators. We did that through email and electronic version of that. We provided them information on who Stock Growers is, what our priorities are, and it was a great exchange with many of those legislators to just kind of, some new, some that are been here for a while, but it's a good opportunity just to reach out to them to let them know, what we're kind of looking at for the legislative session. So those are some of the real key points that we do during any legislative session.
Awesome. All right, this is a fun one. What is the likelihood of grizzly bear delisting under the current administration?
Grizzly bear delisting certainly is, there's a lot of push by the Montana producers, certainly, and the Montana Legislature. We did support a resolution to accomplish that. Unfortunately, we do get caught up in mainly litigation. There has been some efforts with the Fish and Wildlife Service to move toward a delisting. I think with the change in administration from the current to the new Biden administration, I think those efforts are going to be set back dramatically. And I would say that there's not going to be as much interest in getting grizzly bears delisted. We've met the recovery goals. We've met everything that we need to do to move that forward. But I think the administration that's currently going to be looking at this is going to be lower priority, unfortunately.
All right, and we kind of hit on the Department of Livestock earlier, but question that came in was, what is the current status of the Department of Livestock's lab building?
So currently, yeah, we did talk about what a new lab would look like, but I think it's important also to just talk a little bit about what the current facility does. So they do all of our brucellosis testing, and they've made great strides in making that a quicker process. So that helps producers that need to get animals tested in and out of the designated surveillance area. They did hire a really good lab administrator, Dr. Judah, who's done a tremendous job of just getting some of the finances done, some of the processes done. They've hired great staff. So they've done a lot of good work on that front. They've also included CWD, so chronic wasting disease testing, which that's also important for anybody that's, in the hunting community, and also either broader than that, really, I think, for the general public. So the facility is, once again, a little bit aging, but they have a great staff and they have good equipment. And so until that time where we get a new building, I think all good things are happening there in the lab front.
Definitely. All right, well, that kind of wraps up our Q&A section and our first podcast, Jay. We made it. So we just want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to The Rancher's Voice. We also want to just send a friendly reminder out there to make sure to subscribe to our weekly podcast. Look for those email updates in your inbox announcing every week when the new episode rolls out, and to hop on social and make sure that you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And last but not least, make sure you comment, share, and like our podcast. So how do you think we did, Jay?
I think it was a good first time.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to talking to you guys next week. And until then, have a great day.